In this video, we will demonstrate all the features that GVO provides to manage your policies. This will include taking you through the full policy life cycle from creation of a new policy through the development phase, the formal approvals, finalising the policy, and how to publish the policy on the school or college website for parents, staff and even students to see. If it's set up and managed well, it really can be the one-stop shop where there is only one version of the policy in place. I just wanted to begin by showing you where to get some help about policy management, which you might want to refer to later on. In nearly all the screens in GVO, if you look on the top right hand corner, you'll find the help button. If you click on that and then open online help, that will take you to our comprehensive help system, where down the left hand side you will see an alphabetical list of all the things you might want to find some help about. But actually often it's easier to use the search box here, so if I just type the word policy in here, it takes me to all the search results where the word policy is mentioned, and I can click on the policy management summary, which will take me to a header page where I can then look at the policy life cycle and so on. So that might be quite helpful. I want to show you the life cycle that we can follow in GVO as a policy is created right the way through to being published. So a policy can either start as a new policy or a policy update based on its periodic review. So the new draft policy is added to the GVO in the draft policies area, and then it's sent out to the governors to review. Governors can add their comments, whether it's typos or other material that needs to be added to the policy, and the policy author can then amend the policy until it gets to a point where everybody's happy with it. At that stage it moves forward into approvals. And the GVO now has a system where each governor can mark their approval, which is recorded against that policy. And when all the approvals are in, the policy owner can go back and finalise the policy. So what this does, it locks the policy approvals, and it flags the policy as a final policy ready for moving into the current area, and it also allows the policy to be published if you so desire. So once that's done, the policy moves into the current policies area and becomes the new policy, and the old policy is then moved into the archive. The new policy can be flagged for publishing, and publishing can be to the public, perhaps parents for instance, or to a staff area or students. So this is applicable in schools and colleges. Then the policy sits there during its life until it's time for some form of review. So that's the life cycle we're going to map now. Before we create our policy, I just want to take a couple of moments to look at policy folders. Our recommendation is that you really need 3 folders in a school or a college for your policies. One folder for the current policies, which are the ones that are live. One for the historic policies, where old policies are put as like an archive, so you can always go back and see what the policy looked like a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. And a folder for policies under development. It's not essential you do it this way, but it seems to work quite well. And in a multi-academy trust, what you might have is a set of folders like this, one for the trust and then one for each local school board if the local schools are having policies. Now, one thing that's very important here is that a policy folder is different to a normal folder. And if we go into our current policies folder here in our demonstration GVO, the MalCop GVO, you'll see that where normally you would just see the title of the file in the folder and who'd modified it, etc., you now see additional columns popping up like review date, effective date, status and owner, etc. And this is because this is a policy folder. So if you want to check out about a folder, you go to the actions button, you go to the folder, go to the actions button and click folder properties, and this tells you what sort of folder it is. And as you can see there, it says here folder type policy. Now what I'm just going to do is I'm going to show you when you create a folder, there's actually quite a lot of interesting options, and some of them are very relevant to policies. So if I just do actions, new folder, imagine I'm just creating a new folder, it gives me the option to put in the folder name, which I'll just put test. I can put a folder description. Now this is the important part. For a normal folder, you'll be using standard folders. This is a folder where you would store Word documents, PDF files, Excel worksheets and so on. But for a policy folder anywhere in your GVO, you need to select the policy maintenance folder. Now in a normal folder, this is the place where you can decide how files will be sorted inside the folder. Often they're sorted by when they were last modified, so the newest file is at the top, but some people prefer to do it by title or last modified by or whatever. So this is where you would set that at the folder level. Now further down we've got two very interesting checkboxes. The first one is the weekly newsletter, where a folder content can be excluded from the newsletter. This is very important when you've got an archive policies folder, otherwise the newsletter will be highlighting old policies due for review, which actually isn't really very helpful. So if you check that exclude the contents of this folder from the newsletter, that won't happen. And the next checkbox is to do with the publishing. So if you've got archive folders for policies, you definitely don't want them to be published in the weekly newsletter. So you would set that in your archive, and then obviously you submit that and you would create your new folder. So it's a little bit of background there about folders, which is helpful for the policies area, but it's actually helpful across the GVO in terms of how your folders appear. The next item I want to cover is something that's only done probably once, and it's done by the GVO manager, and that's just to set up some master data to do with policies. It's very quick and it's very easy. You find this in the settings area, which is at the bottom of the navigation menu there, and navigate across to the tab that says policies. And what you'll see here, there are just 3 items of master data to sort out. The first one is the policy types. Now it's worth sitting down and deciding what policy types that you want. So when a policy is created, it's allocated a policy type, and this is subsequently used in the reporting tool, so you can filter and just look at the safeguarding policies or the finance policies. The second set of master data is the draft policy status options, and my advice is just to keep it very simple and just have one, which is draft, but if you want more you can have them. And the third box is the final policy status options, and again my advice is keep it simple, just have one final, but you can have more if you want. These are important because when the policy is finalised and you wish to publish it, a policy must be in the status final before it can be published. You cannot publish to the public a draft policy. So that we'll look at that later on when we come to the publishing part. So that's just this master data. You make your changes and then press submit using the green submit button at the bottom of the screen. So we're now at the point where we can actually start to create the policy. So this could be a policy that's up for review and needs to be updated, or it could be a new policy. So I'm doing this in the policies under development folder. I'll use actions new policy. And this opens up a screen where we're going to go through each of these options in turn and explain what they are. The first one is just the name of the policy, so I'll just call this demo. The second one is the policy type. Now this policy type drop-down list comes from the master data that we set a few minutes ago, so I'm going to set this as a safeguarding policy. Now because this is a policy that we're just starting, the policy status I'm going to choose is draft, and again these options have come from the master data that we created a couple of minutes ago, so it's a draft policy. Now, the next question being asked is, which board does this policy refer to? Now, Mount Cop is a single school with only one board, so when I click the drop down it says Mount Cop board. If I was in a multi-academy trust GVO, it would say trust board or school 1 board or school 2 board, and it would only demonstrate and show me the boards that I have access to. So this is how a policy is linked against either a local school or a trust, the trust board in a multi-academy trust, but in our single school example here it's just the Mount Cop board. At this stage the approvals locked is not going to be set because we're not at that point yet. We can flag whether this is a statutory policy or not, and we'll say yes. And this is the point where we say when this policy is ready, who do I want to be able to see it publicly? And I'm going to say, well, actually the public and the staff want to be able to see this one. Now that won't happen yet because this policy is firstly draft and it's not been locked, so it can't be published yet, but we'll come on to that later. We've obviously got to set some date, so I'll start it today and I'll finish it in a year's time. Yes, I would like the policy review date to be showing on the GVO calendar, always good practice to do that. I'll set a policy owner. In this case the policy owner is going to be the GVO head teacher, but you can set as many people as policy owners as you like, and including, if you go down to the bottom you'll see groups. So you can allocate the ownership to a group of people as well as individuals. This is important because these are the people who will start being notified when this policy is due for its next review. I can add some text into here as a description about the policy if I wish. I don't have to put anything in there, but this may be some background descriptive text. And then I can actually add the policy document itself. So attaching a file, I'll set it as example policy draft. And that will get that PDF file, which is my draft policy. And at the moment, you'll see there's a red bar there saying, no, this policy will not be published because it needs to be linked to a board, which it is, the approval's locked, which they're not, and the status is final, which it isn't. So it won't be published at the moment, and I now submit it. GVO is just loading that file up, and that gets my back to the policies under development list, and there's my demonstration policy. If I just click on it into the policy view mode, you'll see all the information I've just typed in, and I can do a preview on it to see that the policy is actually the document that I loaded, which it is. And now I need to send a message out to various people to read this policy and start making their comments and start making their approval. So I'll use the share function, and I'm going to say to the GVO editor and the GVO author users, please read policy and comment or approve. Let's imagine it's the head teacher that's sending this out. So that email has now been successfully sent, and a notification with a link to this policy has been sent. In fact, you heard my computer there just receiving that email for me to review that policy, add my comments and add my approval. So at that stage we're in the life cycle. We've created our policy and we're just starting the review and approve process. Having received the message from the policy owner to have a look at the policy, I'm now signed in as the GVO editor. And if I click onto the policy that was called demo, if you remember, I can have a look at the policy using the preview function, and up it pops. I can make it bigger if I want to. I'm happy with it. I could add some comments. Typo on page 4. Neil. That comment will go against it. If I'm interested to see any discussion or debate that's happening about this policy, I can press the subscribe button, so I'll be notified if there are any changes. But let's imagine that I'm actually quite happy with it. This is where I can now use the approval box and tick my approval and approve the policy. And if I want to check if anybody else has approved it, I can tick press the approval list button, and it shows me who else has approved this policy. So that's my part in this, and I could send a notification back to the head teacher, or the head teacher will see this anyway because he's subscribed and he'll know that I've done that, to start moving this policy from its sort of under development stage into its final stage. So we'll move back now to be the head teacher or the owner of the policy. I'm now signed in again as the owner of the policy, and I've heard that everybody's happy, and I've made my changes to it based on their comments, and I'm now at the point where I'm just wanting to check the approvals. I can have a quick look at the approval list and see, we've got 2 people who have already approved it, GVO editor and GVO author, so I think I'm at the point now where I can move this policy forward from its draft status into its final status. So as the policy owner, I will actions edit this policy. And this is where I'll go down and move this from its policy status draft into final. I'll lock the approvals because everybody who was going to approve it has approved it, and I'm still happy that when it's published it will be published to the staff and public. So that's everything done now. Oh, actually I think I might also lock the comments because I don't want anybody now commenting any further on this policy, so I'll lock the comments on this. So again, this is another choice. But for the policy to be published, it has to be status final, it has to be approval locked, and it needs to be flagged for publishing, but I'll come on to that in just a moment. So I'll now save my policy, and it's just giving me a warning that I'm locking the comments. It's just wanting me to be aware that maybe somebody else with access, at a suitable access level, could come along and unlock them, but in this case I'm happy that nobody's going to do that. So I'll submit that policy, which is still in the policy under development folder. If I just click on it to have a quick look at it, we'll now see that it's safeguarding. There's my dates, there's my ownership, it's status final, Malcott board. And now, because it's a final policy and the approvals are locked and it shows who locked them at what time, I can see the approval list of who actually approved it. I've now got links to the public viewers, and I'll come on to the public viewers in just a moment. So we're now at the point where this policy could be moved from the policies under development into current policies, and I will go and find the equivalent policy if it was a policy review, the old one, and move that into the archive. And now it's appearing in the current policies list. So we've sort of completed that stage of the life cycle, and now I'll move on to just explaining about the publishing features within the policy function. Our demo policy is now finalised and stored in the current policies folder, and I just want to show you how it can be published publicly for other people to see, people who aren't in the GVO. Every board in a GVO and in a single school GVO or a single college GVO, there are 3 web addresses, one for staff viewer, one for public viewer and one for student viewer. If you just go to the users area on the left here and then click board, you will see the name of the board and then the 3 links that represent those public staff and student viewers. In a multi-academy trust, there are 3 addresses for the trust board and 3 addresses for each of the local school boards, which allows you to publicly publish local school policies and also trust policies separately. If I just click on the public one for the Mao Cop School, this opens up a web page which lists all the policies that have been flagged for publishing and are finalised, and all their approvals are locked. And on the right hand side you'll see hyperlinks that take you to each of those policies. Now, even if the policy is stored in GVO in Word or another format, it's converted to PDF here. And before anybody worries, this isn't members of the public getting inside the GVO. This is a completely separate area. GVO has taken the policy, noted that it needed to be published, and moved it somewhere that the public can get to. So it's almost a copy. If that policy is unpublished in GVO, it will disappear from this list. So that's the case in terms of how the policies are published. So if I just move back to the Mao Cop School, if I can find it there. Oops. There we go. And go back to the policy and have a look at it, you'll see that we set our policy to be published to the public and the staff area. If I change my mind as the policy owner, I can edit the policy and I can unflag it for staff and flag it for the student viewer, and then from now on it won't be showing on the staff viewer and it will be showing on the student viewer. So armed with this, really, once those web addresses are placed on the school or college website, everything can be managed centrally from the GVO, and there's no need to start taking copies of policies and having them all over the place. There really does only need to be one policy document, and it's being used multiple times, so that's really, really efficient. So we've now been through the life cycle of a policy, from creation of the new policy or the updated policy, through the development and commenting, through the final approvals, the finalisation of it, and also how to publish it publicly if that's what you need to do. One more thing just to show you is this button on the top right. In any policy folder there's a reporting tool. Click on that and it opens up the reporting page, which is quite similar to a lot of the other parts of reporting in GVO. So you've got a number of checkboxes. This is live reporting, so what's on the screen is what you've selected. So if I only want to look at the statutory policies, I'd click that, and that drops it to just 4 of the policies. If I want to look at all of them, it's now showing 8. I can choose the effective and review dates. I can say I only want to look at final ones or just look at the safeguarding ones, and so on. So it's live reporting. When you've got on your screen what you wanted, you can copy it to your clipboard, you can send the information to Excel, you can generate a nicely formatted PDF report, or you can print it. So that's quite a handy way of being able to do some reporting on your policy situation. So that's the reporting area. So just a quick summary on what we've covered in this webinar. We've been through the creation and life cycle of a policy. We've showed the publishing options, the approvals, etc. We've looked at reporting, and I guess it boils down to, so what next? So if you were to go back to your own GVO and think about how to benefit from all this, these features, I would suggest that you start off by having a good look at the master data, get the policy type sorted out, let the governors know that we're going to start using the GVO for this purpose, encourage users in the development and approval process, Think about how you can use the public publishing options onto your school or college website to save time, get the report to help manage policies, and hopefully, if you manage it all well, save some time. So I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, and if you've got any questions, please do call us on our support desk. That's 01273 921066. Thanks.